this week's video is gonna be a little bit different. As you can see, I'm not at our RV. We're actually in Bloomington, Indiana, visiting with my daughter and her boyfriend, and this is their house. And this video is driven really by a comment that we got several weeks ago from a viewer who wanted to know why surge protectors with the electrical management systems built into them are necessary for an RV when we don't really ever see them in our residential sticks and bricks homes. And there's a very good reason for that, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. And this is all very good timing because our daughter and her boyfriend have been having some issues with their radon mitigation system. If you don't know what a radon mitigation system is, it's basically just a system that sucks air out of your basement and then it exhausts it outside to prevent the buildup of radon inside the house. So anyway, they were having a problem. This is the fan for that system right here. And I guess this thing stopped working a few months ago. So they called the radon mitigation system people to come out and take a look at it. And basically, long story short is, he said, yeah, you've got a wiring problem here. So this is the permanent wiring that goes to the fan. He said, you got a problem with that. I'm gonna give you a temporary fix, which is this janky extension cord that's run into an outlet outside. Now, this was several months ago that this was done, and this is definitely not the way that this should have been left. And so I've actually already done a bunch of work on this, but we're gonna kind of go over what the problem was and how I fixed it. But I wanted to show real quick what this clown did when he came out here. So obviously he put this temporary cord in here, this extension cord, but this is how he left the permanent wiring outside. So this is pretty bad, right? Number one, there's no weather protection here at all. So this is just sitting out here like this. And then what we've got here is we've got the neutral line here, right? So this is just your standard 12-2 Romex that's going out here. So it's got 3 wires. It's got the hot, the neutral, and the ground. And so what we got here is we've got the neutral just kind of hanging out over here by itself. And then what this clown did was, I don't know why he did this, but he tied the hot and the ground together here and put a wire nut over the top of it. So why is this bad? Well, let's just put it this way. My daughter and her boyfriend, they weren't really sure what was going on with all of this, and they weren't really sure how what that guy did affected the operation of this. So originally, this thing's powered from a breaker panel down in the basement, and then it ran up to a light switch, and then it ran up to the fan. So you could turn this fan off by either opening the breaker or turning off that light switch. Now, number one, that's a code violation. This thing is supposed to be on its own circuit, and there's not supposed to be any kind of switch in between the breaker and the fan. So that light switch never should have been there in the first place. But when he left, he didn't really explain, I guess, everything that he did or how this system really works now. And so my daughter, not knowing any of that, she noticed that the light switch was off in the basement, and she flipped the light switch on. Well, as soon as she did that, because the ground and the hot wire up here are tied together, it immediately tripped the breaker, of course, because it was a direct short to ground. It drew a lot of current and it tripped the breaker. Now, I guess the radon guy admitted he was not an electrician. You know, he just gave him a temporary fix to keep this fan going, which I don't really think was even necessary because, you know, in the short term, this radon, any radon that's going to build up inside of this house it's not going to hurt anybody, you know, if it's off for a couple of weeks. So there was really no reason to even do all this jankiness over here. But for him to tie those lines together, that's just completely unacceptable. He should have never been working on this. He obviously doesn't understand how this works, or he just didn't have the forethought to say, hey, I've got these things tied together down here. Don't ever turn that switch on. It's just a mess, right? So anyway, this is what I've been working on this week. I've done everything inside that I need to do. The only thing that's left is to get this hooked back up the right way up here. But before I do that, I wanted to go down and just talk about some things down in the basement, talk about the breaker box, and I want to talk a little bit about the difference between residential electrical systems and the systems that we have in our RV. And I want to specifically address why we don't need those surge protectors with the electrical management systems in them for our homes, but why we do need them for our RVs. So it's about to start raining out here. I hear some thunder back here behind me coming from somewhere. So we're gonna go inside and we're gonna talk about that stuff. All right, guys, so the first things first here, I just need to apologize. I don't know how the lighting looks on this because, well, if you saw where I'm working down here, I'm in the basement and I'm kind of shoved in a corner, and all I have is this stinking ring light, which is shining crazy in my face. But I wanted to start at the main panel here, and this is where I want to start talking about the similarities and the differences between the electrical system in our sticks and bricks home and the electrical system in our RVs, because they are similar, but they also have some very important differences. So let's just start with the similarities here, right? And I'll point out here that the similarity really only applies to the 50 amp RVs out there. If you've got a 30 amp RV, well, I'll talk about that here in just a minute, but if you've got a 30 amp RV, it is quite a bit different. So when we talk about the similarities between what we see here and what we've got in a 50 amp RV, the biggest thing is we have two legs of power coming in both to our house and into our RV. So at a 50 amp pedestal, we know that we've got two hots, we've got a neutral and we've got a ground, and that's exactly what we've got in this panel as well. So up here coming in, we've got hot 1 and we've got hot 2. We've got our neutral line or our neutral bus bar over here on the right, and then we've got our ground bus bar over here on the left. And this is very similar to our 50 amp RV. The biggest difference here, however, is that in an RV, these two lines that come in are completely separate from each other, meaning we only ever have access to 120 volt power inside of our RV. And there's some very good reasons for that I'm not really going to go into, but just keep in mind in our RV, they're separated and we only ever have 120 volts. Now in our homes though, we have things like a well pump. If you have a well, you've got an oven, you've got a clothes dryer, and all of those appliances draw a lot of power. And if we look right down here at this equation at the basic power equation, and this is a really good thing for all RVers to know, is a basic power equation. We can see that power is equal to the voltage times the current in any circuit. So in our homes, we've got those appliances and they draw a lot of power. And the goal of having 240 volts available in our home really is to keep that amount of current that those appliances draw down to a minimum. And the first thing to keep in mind about this equation and what we're talking about here is the voltage is always going to be right at about 120 volts. So in our equation down here, that's always going to stay the same. So the only two real variables in this equation are going to be the power and the current. So let's assume here that our oven draws 2400 watts, and we've got on the other side of the equation, we've got 120 volts. So 120 volts times 20 amps equals that 2400 watts. So that 2400 watt load at 120 volts is going to draw 20 amps. Now let's change that 120 volt number to 240 volts, and now we can see the balance on this equation kind of shifts. The power that load draws is going to remain constant at that 2400 watts, but now we have that 240 volts. So that 240 volts now means that we only need to draw 10 amps to supply the same amount of power to that oven. And that's basically why we have 240 volts available to us in our sticks and bricks residential electrical system. And how they do that in a house is you can see these two stabs down here on the bottom. Well, each of those stabs is powered from one leg of power coming in. So for example, the second one from the bottom here, right, that one's powered from this leg over here, and then the bottom one would be powered from this leg over here. And if we look inside of our panel, we've got two types of breakers in here. We've got double pole breakers and we've got single pole breakers. The double pole breakers are what we use for our 240 volt loads. And the way that we do that is those breakers actually plug into two different stabs inside of this panel. So now we've got that breaker basically taking 120 volts from each side, and without really getting too deep into this, it kind of just adds them together for that 220 volts. Now, like I said before, we don't have the 240 volts in our RVs. There's a lot of good reasons for that, but that's one of the big differences between our residential system and our RV system, is that we have the ability to pull 240 volts out of this panel for those big appliances. And another key difference here, and it's something that I've talked about many times in a lot of our videos, and that difference is where we get our ground to neutral bond in our electrical systems in our home versus in our RV. Now, in our RV, we do not bond together or tie together the ground and the neutral. And the reason for that is because we expect that bond to take place on the campground side of the pedestal, because we only want one ground to neutral bond in any electrical system. So since the campground is already doing that for us, the RV manufacturers do not put that ground to neutral bond inside of our RVs. However, in our sticks and bricks homes, we do have that ground to neutral bond inside of this panel. So again, if we look in here, we've got our ground bus bar over here, we've got our neutral bus bar over on the right side, and then if we look real close, we can see a bus bar that runs all the way from the neutral side bus bar all the way over to the ground bus bar, and it ties those two legs together. And as I think I said in last week's video, I'm not gonna get super in depth on that, but basically that's what allows these breakers to do their jobs when you have some sort of a ground fault inside of either your RV or inside of your home. So for example, if you have a toaster oven and the wiring inside comes loose and that hot wire touches the frame of that toaster oven, that's what allows these breakers to say, oh, I see a fault out there and I'm gonna trip the breaker for that toaster oven. That bond between the ground and the neutral is what allows that breaker to protect us from those ground fault situations. All right, so now that we kind of have looked at the similarities and differences between what a 50 amp RV and your residential wiring looks like, let's talk real briefly about the 30 amp system. And this is really very simple. A 30 amp system only has one leg of power coming into the RV. We don't have that second leg that comes in that allows us to run basically twice the amount of loads in our RV. Okay, before all you keyboard warriors wet your pants out there, I get it. A 50 amp RV isn't double a 30 amp RV. It's actually more than triple. I get that, but I think I got my point across. And then now let's get to kind of what set this video off in the first place. And that was that comment we got a few weeks ago from a doubter who didn't think that we need to have surge protectors with these EMSs in our RVs because guess what? We don't have them in our residential homes. But there's a very good reason that we don't have them in our homes. And first, let's just talk about what the surge protectors with those EMS or the electrical management systems do for us. So basically, obviously it's a surge protector and it's gonna kind of protect us from surges that are coming in through that power pedestal. But the biggest thing that they do is with that electrical management system, if that thing detects that there's dirty power coming into our RV, it will shut the power off immediately to protect everything inside of your RV, your air conditioner, your microwave, all of those appliances that are just really expensive to have to replace. So why do we need that EMS protecting our RV? Well, let's think about this for a second. Campground electrical systems. Who do we think is maintaining those? It's probably not a licensed electrician, and it's probably not anybody that has ever had any real formal training on electrical systems at all. Campgrounds are either going to hire whoever is going to work for the least amount of money, or they're going to take volunteers or work campers to maintain these electrical systems, right? So what I'm trying to say here, and this is from personal experience because we have worked at a few campgrounds, most of those people have zero clue what they're doing, and I absolutely do not trust them that they have wired up anything correctly. And that's where we start to see things like reversed hot and neutral because they don't understand how these systems work, or they're just not paying attention, or a combination of the two. And the next thing you know, we've got a pedestal that's wired up completely backwards, and we've now fried our AC, we fried our microwave, who knows what we fried inside of our RV. Additionally, those circuit breakers and those outlets on those pedestals, they take a beating every single day, and they go bad quite often. So not only we have these jokers out here who are doing electrical work that shouldn't be doing electrical work, but we've also got these components that are really being stressed to their max and abused on a daily basis by campers who they don't care about the pedestal, right? They just want to plug in, turn on their AC, and then when they're done, they want to unplug and leave. That's all they want to do. So the point here is there could very easily be a problem with the campground's electrical system, and there is very often problems with campground electrical systems for all of those reasons. So that's why we need that surge protector with the electrical management system in it to protect us from those situations. Now, in a residential home, who's working on all of the electrical systems? Well, it's more than likely a licensed, knowledgeable electrician who's been doing this for years, and they know exactly how this stuff is supposed to work, and they've been formally trained. And the same thing goes for the transformer that you may have sitting in your front yard or up on a telephone pole outside of your house. Those are all very highly trained and highly skilled electricians working on those systems. We don't have just a bunch of yahoos out there running around doing whatever they think is right. And that's the reason we don't need those electrical management systems monitoring the power in our homes. So the bottom line here is the chances of you running into some kind of dirty power are significantly greater when you are traveling around at all these different campgrounds than they are getting dirty power into your house. Okay, and let's get back to what's actually going on inside of this house right now, because it does have a little bit of a similarity to some of the things that I've talked about in the past with some of that dirty power that comes into an RV, like, you know, an open neutral or open ground, that kind of stuff. We've got a little bit of the same scenario going on here. And there's actually a few different things going on here that are not right about this whole setup. So number one is when they installed this radon mitigation system, per code, that system is supposed to be on its own breaker. So the power should go from the breaker straight to the fan. The light switch should have never been put in there. So that's one problem right there, is that light switch that was put in there. The second problem here is that they tied the radon mitigation fan into the same circuit as the dishwasher. That's another code violation. Dishwashers and radon mitigation systems are supposed to be on their own circuits. They can't share a circuit with anything else. So that's problem number two. There's some other code violations going on up here in this drop ceiling up here with all the wiring and everything. But most of that stuff is, I don't know, I would call it kind of negligible. It's not going to cause any problems, and I'm not going to mess with any of that. But the real issue that they noticed initially was that radon mitigation fan just wasn't running at all. So that's when they called the guy to come fix it. He did his thing out there, and he told him, listen, you're going to have to contact a real electrician to get the wiring fixed inside of the home. So when I got here, the first thing that I did was go up there and test those wires that were coming from the circuit breaker, coming from that light switch up to the fan. That was an easy thing to do because that guy just left them totally exposed. So all I had to do was just go up there and take some voltages. And here's what I found. When I took a voltage up there from the hot lead to the ground, I got 115 volts, which is right about what I would expect to get in a residential home. And then when I took my reading from the hot line to the neutral, I was getting only about 87 volts. And right away, my first assumption is that we've got a problem in the neutral line with that circuit. And so you might be asking yourself, well, listen, if a home had one of those surge protectors with the electrical management system in it, wouldn't it have caught that? No, it wouldn't have caught that because it was on a single branch of the circuit. It would have been downstream of what was being monitored. And the electrical management system set up, you know, like it is in our RV, it would have never caught that. So long story short, that's why the fan wasn't working, because we had a floating neutral somewhere in that circuit. And to be honest with you, I never actually found where that problem was because I wasn't able to find all of that wiring, but I was able to find enough of it that I could test and then run another short piece of wiring that I needed to get over here to the breaker panel so that I could put that whole system on its own breaker. I know this is a lot to digest, but let's just look real quick at how this system was initially set up. All right, so initially that radon system was tied into, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this circuit right here. And this was originally just the dishwasher circuit. And then this power coming out of here goes up and kind of disappears into the ceiling somewhere. And like I said a while ago, I wasn't able to find all of that wiring, but what I did find is this junction box right up in here. And so that power coming out of that panel goes up into the ceiling, like I said before, goes up and disappears somewhere. And then somewhere down here, they tapped in to that dishwasher circuit and ran that electrical line to the fan. Well, part of that wiring comes into this electrical box right here. That's these wires over here. Now I've disconnected and terminated these wires inside of this box because, again, I don't know and I haven't been able to test what's going on with that wiring upstream of this box. But regardless, that power came into here, into this junction box. They wire nutted everything together here, and then they sent it over to the light switch. And this is where the light switch used to be. And because this is not supposed to have a switch between the breaker and the fan, I went ahead and just removed that light switch and just basically set this up as another junction box. So the power comes from that first junction box that we saw over there, comes into this one, and then it runs up and outside to the actual fan. So again, because I couldn't find all of that other wiring, but I knew that I could tap in here, what I did was I checked all of the wiring from this junction box over to the other junction box where the light switch was. I checked all of that wiring, everything checked out fine. And then I checked the wiring from where that light switch was all the way up to the fan. All of that wiring is fine. So at that point I knew those two legs of this whole line were fine. And I just decided that I would run a new line from this junction box through the ceiling down here. Nice and easy because it's a drop ceiling, but I ran this new line over to the breaker panel, brought it down into the panel and gave it its own breaker like it's supposed to have. And this is the new breaker, the new circuit for that radon mitigation system right here. So that radon fan has got its own 15 amp breaker, and so does the dishwasher now. And again, that's required by code that those are supposed to be on their own circuits. And the only thing that I've got left to do is actually connect those wires up to the fan outside. Although I don't know that I'm going to be able to get that done right now because I think I can hear it raining cats and dogs up there. And it's supposed to rain, I think, all afternoon. But anyway, that's all I got left. Get that connected, and then all of this will finally be all hooked up and working the way that it should have been done from the get-go. All right, guys, so that's gonna wrap it up for this week. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down there. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, and then while you're down there, make sure you hit the bell to get notified of all of our future videos. And until that future video, happy camping and stay safe out there, guys.